What's up, my few and far between supporters? Today, I want to talk about something that's a little bit close to home. A little bit of a book update. I have some outlines for some books that I want to work on. I know the last book I wrote relatively quickly. I'm up to 3 books this year. And I kind of want to see if I can do a little bit more research about marketing before I really start working on my next one. I want to see if I can get some sort of sales before I just keep kind of throwing work at it. Plus, it's kind of a thing that I need to learn how to do to be able to grow as a person and to be able to like maybe find new opportunities in the future. But that's kind of that being said, today I want to talk about being a man. And I'm going to start with politics to try to show how my brain works and thinks about this particular subject. One of the things that I've been trying to do to get some sort of following and some sort of supporters is I've been trying different avenues and different ways of interacting with my social media to see what I can possibly do to make it grow. So far, the thing that's worked the best, my subscribers hasn't grown, but some shorts that I have gotten a couple hundred views. And normally it's just my more humorous ones. I've noticed that people just prefer it if I try to make them laugh and not make them think. We'll see how long that lasts, if it lasts at all. But anyway, another thing that I've tried to do is commenting on other people's videos. And the reason why is because I've noticed that there's occasionally a time, mostly on Instagram, where people will randomly follow me because I left a comment on a video and they liked my comment. And they liked it enough to be willing to follow me. I've noticed that occasionally some political videos will come up. And this video that I saw last night led me down a rabbit hole of thought to where today I want to talk about manhood and manliness and what it means to be a man. I saw a video that was a political video where it was kind of like a rage bait, where a girl who I'm guessing you're to presume that she is a Democrat or a liberal. You know, she like the video starts off and the music's a little sad, and it's like if you support all of if you voted for all of these things and you support it, and then like the music changes and she smiles and she says, "Then I want to be your friend," because like she actually agrees with it. And I saw that and I was like, okay, this is gonna get some people. I can get people fired up in this comment section. And I was curious because when I pulled up the comment section, everybody was saying that they agreed with it. Nobody was really disagreeing with the message that was sent, but there was absolutely no specifics. Like nobody knew, or didn't seem to know, or didn't think they needed to specify the things that they actually agreed with and the things that they liked, that they voted for, supposedly. Some of the comments literally said, yes, all of the things. Like they couldn't even say policies, they said things. Like it's just like they're disconnected from it to understand to not be able to understand like what in the world is happening in our news. But also like they're connected to it because like to them it's just this identity of being a Republican and a conservative. So I thought to myself, I said, I wonder, because any other video like that has a different opinion than me, if I leave a comment on, there's always somebody who's like willing to leave a response and a reply. So I thought about it. I said, what should I put on here? And I want to see if I just want to see if I get a response. I said, does anybody actually know what they voted for? Now, normally by today, I would have received some sort of response. On my other comments, I've received responses, and I still receive responses from ones that I've left like a week ago. And today I pulled it up, and you want to know how many responses I got? It wasn't 1, it wasn't 5, it wasn't 10, 20, 100, 30, 300. It was 0. Nothing. Nobody cared or maybe they didn't want to show ignorance by trying to respond and not actually knowing what they were talking about. I almost don't know. Um, and I thought about that, and it made me think, and it made me think, and I was like, well, like, it's just people who like identify with a thing, but don't really understand that thing. And I thought about it, and I was like, thinking about the other things that people identify with, that they don't really understand what they're identifying with. I thought about religion and how a lot of people will use their Bibles and their Christian labels as almost like a participation trophy, and like this community, but the community doesn't really have any principles, or like they don't really have a set of values that they point to that they really seem to agree with. It's just they kind of say they believe in the Bible, and then they kind of just move on with their life because they think that's enough. I think about Democrats that kind of do a similar thing. Like, I support gay people and trans people, but like that's like they don't really know about it or understand it or care about it. I think about Republicans. I believe in the Republican Party and traditional values, but they don't really know what traditional values are and how much our values have actually changed. And then I thought about women and men. Women getting mad at trans people and men getting mad at trans people, and men, all of these red pill people that go on TV and they in our media and our social media, and they say things that you need to do to be a man. And it made me think about what I think manliness is, or what I personally think manliness is. And it made me wonder if the aspects of manliness that I agree with, do I agree with them because they happen to align with my politics? Do I agree with them because I think I exhibit them? Well, no. There are some aspects of manliness that I think that I don't really exhibit that well. A lot of people think manliness is like being successful and being like a provider for your family, so that your wife and your kids don't have to work and to be able to afford to put food on the table. And I thought about that, and I was like, well, that's not really realistic. Like it doesn't matter how hard I work. Like, I have to get lucky to find a job where I can afford to pay my rent, and my fiance wouldn't have to work. I don't want her to work, but I can't afford that, and she can't afford that. And it would take a long time for me to get into a position where I could afford that. So that's not really much of an option for a lot of people. Maybe it would be if rent was cheaper, or if I bought a house 5 years ago, and instead of trying to save money, but whatever, property values and all that sort of stuff, like, it's a little bit more complicated. And then people try to say things like, I've noticed that there's been some research that people will do with I've noticed that rich, successful businessmen will have a lot of TED Talks, and people really care about what these people have to say. And they try to display manliness. They try to wear suits. They try to be physically fit. They try to say, like, this is a manly thing to do. This is what it means to be a man, and blah, blah, blah. And to me, it's just stupid. It's stupid because, of course, they're going to say that everything that they do is manliness. They are manly. You are not. I'm like, well, what is manliness really to me, right? Does it mean being successful? Probably not. Does it mean being so full of yourself that you think you can go on the internet and speak about yourself as though you're some sort of expert in fields that you know nothing about? Probably not. I'm probably a little bit guilty of that too, to be honest with you. Does it mean being big and strong? Well, I'm big and strong, and to be honest with you, I think that has nothing to do with whether or not I'm manly. I'm just a guy that likes to work out. And then I started thinking, like, what's a compliment that really made me feel manly? Was it when I received compliments from women? Maybe, kind of. Sometimes. Was it when I received compliments from people about my working out? Well, it's nice, but it doesn't make me feel manly. The best compliment that I've ever received came from my fiance's grandfather. We were in Florida, and they had a little house they stayed down there during the winter time so that they can be in warmer weather. And she wanted me to meet him, and she warned me. She said, he's gonna be very judgmental. He's not gonna like that you're not shaved. He's not gonna like that your hair's not done. He's not gonna like that you're wearing sweatpants. So just be ready for him to be a little bit critical of you. I said, okay. And so I was ready, because I don't dress in suits, and I don't try to look all nice, and I don't try to impress people, and I don't try to do anything. I don't try to really do anything to make people think more of me. Or to make people think that I'm stronger than you. Like, a lot of times I forget that I'm bigger than the average person, and I bump into shit. And I remember when I met him, he was really nice. He seemed really excited to see me. And I remember shaking his hand, and I thought about it because he was an old man. He wasn't frail by any means, but he was, you could tell that, like, he's lost some muscle mass. Like, he still can do his job, but he can still do things. But, like, he's not as big and strong as he used to be, or he's not, like, if he was big and strong, or he's not as young as he used to be. And there's a certain point where when you're old enough, like, there is a little bit of fragility that you have. Like, you can't look at somebody over 70 years old unless if they've been training their entire lives and expect them to lift a heavy weight pretty easily. Because that's kind of just what happens with everybody. Eventually time gets the better of you, and you start to slowly wither and slowly become less and less until you fade out, or until something else kind of just takes you out, like a disease or organ failures, or the countless other affiliations to death or connections that we have to death that can cause it. And I shook his hand, and like, I try not to be like overly aggressive when I shake people's hands, because I've broken things on accident. A lot of times, like, I'm the kind of person that's really clumsy, so like I can put too much force into something and break it on accident. I'm like, oh shit, that's gonna be a hard thing to explain. It's happened, right? And I noticed that he seems to, like, I expected him to want me to firmly shake his hand, but we had like a reasonable handshake. Like, it wasn't really firm. It was just a handshake, right? Like, there was almost no firmness to it. And like later, after we left, my fiance told me, she said, like, he really likes you. And he told me that he could tell how strong your hands were and how easily you could have probably broken his hand if you wanted to, but you chose, and you were very conscientious and careful enough to not do it, and you didn't want to be like this super strong, I'm going to shake your hand as hard as humanly possible and blah 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 blah. Like, you just were very considerate and were very humble and shook his hand. And he said he could feel the power, but he could also feel the restraint that you had. And she said, my fiance looked at me and she said, like, I've never heard him say that about anybody that I've dated, any guy friend that I had when I was younger, nobody. She said, I thought he was going to rip you a new one, but he really liked you. And to be honest, I think that a lot of people who really care about manliness and being manly and all of these fucking things and all whatever label that you have, it is so superficial that you kind of miss the point. This falls back onto feminism. This falls back onto being conservative or Christian or liberal or Democrat, whatever you are, feminine, masculine, blah, blah, blah. People look to the surface and try to display things on the surface and put so little thought into themselves that they don't really grow or learn about themselves. And they don't know what to work on, what to fix, what to improve on. And they kind of just mentally, not physically necessarily, but mentally, in a very lazily way, go through their lives as if they don't want to be mentally challenged or ask themselves hard questions. There are a lot of aspects about myself that I find to be not manly. I can be very immature. I can be impatient and easily angered. I can be short-fused, and I can And to me, it's not like, oh, that's feminine. That's a woman thing. Like, no, the opposite of being manly isn't being womanly necessarily, because it's more complicated than that. Like, I don't look at those things as like, oh, women are supposed to lose control of their emotions, or like women are supposed to get easily angered. No, I just think it's childish, and like there's certain aspects of me that still feels like a child. Like, I still feel a little bit like a kid in a big body. I still think of myself as younger than I actually am. I still think of myself in the same way that I would thought of myself when I was 17. There are a lot of times where I don't recognize my own influence over people and how convincing I can be when I talk to people in person. There are a lot of times where I fail to show that restraint, and there are consequences to my actions because I did these actions so carelessly. When I say what I'm thinking bluntly, that can be very childish because I'm so inconsiderate that I have caused consequences through carelessness. And I think it's easy for me to say that those, like, the things that I aspire to be are manly. But to me, I think it's also just being an adult and learning how to maturely go through your life and learning how to grow as a person in your own way, while also still accepting you for what you are. And that's the hard part, in all honesty, accepting what you are so that you can move on to the next thing. Because moving on is scary. It's confusing. You can't just change the way you think. And you can't just change your own actions. But a lot of people, particularly people who I think are a little bit what's the word? Self-conscious. They look to the surface too much, to the point to where they only care about surface level things. And when you only care about surface level things, you find that there's nothing beyond scratching the surface in that aspect of their personality. People can look at my videos of me lifting weights and say, oh my God, you're a tank, you're a beast, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of times those are the same people that when they go to shake my hand, they try to squeeze it as hard as they can. And I've noticed that, like, my current boss did that with me. And I was thrown off. I was like, why are you trying to do that? No, that's immature. That's stupid. Don't do that. Because, like, that's not impressive to me. Like, I don't care how hard you can squeeze my hand. One, I could probably squeeze your hand a lot harder than you can squeeze mine. Unless if you have some absurdly strong hands, or you've worked in construction your whole life, or you're just an absurdly strong person. But two, I know people that can hurt my hands and choose not to. And I can hurt your hand and I choose not to. And a lot of people like try to pretend to like fighting. Like guys who like want to be manly pretend to like confrontation or like fighting. And I like confrontation too. Confrontation can be fun. But confrontation wears on you and it changes you as a person and it makes you a more bitter person. And it makes you see bad things in people that aren't always necessarily there. Also, if you haven't really been in a bad confrontation, you don't know the potential downsides to that confrontation. You don't know when a confrontation can go bad. You don't know what to look for in that confrontation. It's kind of like, it reminds me of like a police training video I saw where I kind of liked it, where it was verbal judo. And the guy was basically talking, he talked really fast and he talked a lot. One of the things he says, you know, like, if you like fighting, you've never been in a good fight. Because a good fight fucking sucks. Like, your face hurts, your whole body hurts, you're tired, you're sore. It's just fucking miserable. Unless if you're conditioned to be able to take care of that. But even then, like, most people who practice fucking fighting and, like, go to these dojos and shit, very few of them have actually gotten a really bad beating. And that's not fun. And a lot of these people do that stuff so that they can be prepared, so they can take care of business when they have to. Because they want to, they feel a need to think of themselves as dangerous. So they constantly do things to try to justify it. And then it reminds me of people who practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they'll tell you, like, hey, the difference between an experienced person and an inexperienced person is how much effort they try to put into it. Like, people who are brand new will try to hurt you in the warm-ups, whereas experienced people are trying to, like, make sure they're getting good training and they're trying to get good reps and all that sort of fun stuff. It's the same thing with relationships. You know, guys and girls who are self-conscious and can't control themselves or don't understand enough about relationships to be able to have one become the biggest downfall of that relationship. And I've been that person many times, where you're self-conscious and all of your faults become the faults of the other person, and it's basically reasons to have arguments, and it's reasons to think that the relationship's not going to work, and blah, blah, blah. And then you end up with these toxic situations because people don't want to admit when they're scared. People don't want to admit where they're vulnerable, because that's a scary thing to think about, is vulnerability. True vulnerability, not just, oh, you know, you beat me in this video game because I'm not really good at this one particular part. Like, no, like, hey, you hate yourself, and because you hate yourself, like, you project that hatred outward. That's a hard thing to fucking swallow. That's a big fucking pill to swallow. Been true for me, though. It's really hard, but it's true. I've projected my hatred out towards a lot of people. But also, I have allowed that knowledge of it to influence me to not criticize things that need to be criticized. Because when you have problems, right, if you're like me, right, the moment you have mental health problems, it's the worst fucking thing ever. Not because you don't, like, you're anxious and scared and depressed and all that sort of fun stuff. No, like, it's because you almost don't know where you're wrong. Because a lot of people will try to dismiss you because of it. And the problem with mental health issues is, like, that confusion, that distance that you have from reality, where you're either projecting a lot of blame inward or you're projecting a lot of blame outward, and you really don't know what to blame on what. And you don't know where the problem is. And I feel that for a lot of people. It's kind of the reason why in my books, Life is Hard When You're Stupid and Work Faster and Slower, I'm very big on this idea that personal responsibility is a good thing, but it can be easily used against you. Because I have been that person that has tried very hard to speak out against something, or to be the one to try to correct a problem, or to stand up for somebody who hasn't tried to, who is too scared to stand up for themselves. Because, you know, if you work in a political environment, particularly, people don't want to be the one to jump on the grenade or to deal with the bomb that is management mistreating their workers, and or society mistreating people, or anything like that. And what ends up happening is people end up becoming victims, and the people who know that those people are becoming victims don't say anything, because lest they might have the consequence of daring to speak truth. I had a conversation with my boss, my current boss, 2 days ago, where I said something, and I don't know if he didn't care or if he was just kind of stunned with what I said, but he didn't really say anything afterwards. We were talking about principles, and I said, I think the saddest thing about principles is that people will want to have them, but they abandon them the moment they become inconvenient, or it can negatively impact them. And I think what's the point of having your principles if they can be taken away and dismissed the moment it gets hard? And I think a lot of people do that, right? Like I try to live my life that way. Like I don't care about the negative consequences so long as the consequences are within reason to do what I think is the right thing. Unless if it's going to hurt my family, then maybe. But like in my previous job, I tried to be the one that was willing to speak up for people who were too scared to, because people would be in a lot of unfair situations. People would be spoken about by supervisors without their point of view, to the point to where these people were having negative views on them. Were having negative views from their bosses because of the gossip that was happening with bosses. And a lot of times I was like, well, you haven't really seen it from their point of view. I talked with them and this is what they told me. Have you tried having an opinion with somebody by actually speaking to them instead of just interpreting it from afar? And that's what I've noticed. And that's what I spoke out against a lot. And that's the problem. And that's why in that book I particularly wrote, I'm like, when you have supervisors who cannot admit where they are wrong, then you don't know if you're wrong. If you try to be a man and you're not willing to admit where in your life you're a little bit manly, where in your life you might be I don't want to say this word because of the other connotation, but compensating, not just for the size of your Johnson, but also for your actual aspects of manliness. You know, if you're not willing to acknowledge that and you're constantly trying to define yourself as it, or you're constantly just saying it and trying to project your aggression outwards and trying to say, like, I have higher testosterone, or you're a low testosterone male, or blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, no, not necessarily. Have you actually gotten your testosterone measured, or are you just on steroids? Because a lot of these people who care about having high testosterone are people in their 40s that are absurdly jacked, and they take steroids in secret because, of course, they fucking do. Because everything in this country is just a paper dragon. And principles are easily abandoned when it comes to money, when it comes to people's convenience. And I find this to be cowardly. I find many people to be cowardly. People only care about issues when it's in proximity to them. People only care about things when it's in proximity to them. A lot of people are trying to teach you to be submissive to a society. Like I was reading a book where it was like, what if you just let them? And I was going to audition for the audiobook, and I wasn't really feeling it. I didn't really want to do it. I had other things I wanted to do. I decided to start writing my book instead. And like the entire concept was just to let things happen to you and to stop trying to control things that are outside of your control. Well, the problem with that is there are people who have control over things, and that kind of thinking prevents those people from hearing the complaints, the problems, the issues that they themselves are causing. And this is why I'm so critical of management and leadership, is we have taken this concept of personal responsibility and we have abused it and turned it into something virtually indistinguishable, to a point to where we have to deny reality. We have to deny that there is a world and there are problems in that world and there are people causing those problems. We have to deny the problems or ignore the problems that don't directly affect us, because if they don't affect us, we can just simply easily push away our ability to affect a situation by saying it's outside of my control. It's not my responsibility. My view of manhood obviously is going to try to define, I'm trying to define myself as being manly, so question this if you want to. But I think that's not manly. I think submission to authority under the guise of not letting things bother you that you can't control shuts down a lot of conversations. It shuts down a lot of discussions. It prevents messages from being sent to the people that need to hear it, because you can control things. You just have to have enough people to do it. You can be more active in your community. You just have to make the time to do it. You can speak to people who are struggling. You just have to make the time to do it. I constantly try to look for people who are struggling mentally and try to talk to them and see what's wrong. Not because I want it to be my business, but because I know sometimes I can be helpful. I've had a lot of experience talking with people going through mental health crises. It would be easy for me to say I couldn't control it, so it's not my problem. A lot of times there were things within my control that I found out because I simply cared enough to look into it. And I think people need to care about their principles. The people need to spend a long time thinking about their principles and what matters to you. And what are you going to do about it? And at what point does your principles break? And why does it break? Is it because the situation changes to a point to where it's a completely different principle? Or is your principle only extended to a certain point? And why? Be true to yourself to a point to where you can recognize your own authority and influence and capabilities in a situation that most people would find to be impossible and hopeless. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I care too much about things that I have no control over. Maybe I spend too much time on the internet. That's certainly true. Maybe I just want to hear more reasonable and rational voices in a world that is consistently being more politically divided, and people are trying to divide themselves into these groups of people without fully thinking about what they're saying. And maybe I think that maybe I can help just a little bit.